What's the most ridiculous rule in your place of work? Once I needed a pen. Figured this was a reasonable ask. Went to the supply closet on my floor, which was locked. Asked the floor's admin. She told me to go to the main supply room in the basement. Went to the basement and explained my situation of needing a pen. They told me all requests for supplies must be approved by my department head. Problem is, being new, I'd never met my department head. She also worked in San Francisco. I worked in Milwaukee. So I needed to send an email both introducing myself and asking her if I had permission to get a pen from the supply closet. Rule number 1 to working an office job, BYOP, bring your own pens. Corporate pens are bad news. I will die on that hill. Story 2. 2 weeks after I left my previous job, a memo went round saying people aren't allowed to look out of the windows at work anymore. It's a big-ass glass building. Edit. To those that have been asking, it's not American Express. Eyes shifting. Story 3. I drive valet. The company handbook says you're never allowed to back up. Ever. You absolutely cannot do the job without reverse. It's impossible. It's in there because of liability and our insurance policy. This way, it can always be the valet's fault if an accident occurs ever. Edit. Perhaps this will answer the most repeated question. If the rule says no reverse, yet you're expected to park a car, then how can you park the car? Answer. Never hit anything, and always reverse despite the rules. Expect to be fired should you hit anything in reverse, but probably not. The rule only exists to cover the company's ass, but if they don't feel threatened by you working there and you're an asset, you will still not be fired. And yes, many people are questioning the legality of it, and you're right. It wouldn't hold up in courts, but it's in the handbook and it's silly, so I posted it. Story 4. All the extra toilet paper in the building has to stay in a single closet where it can be overseen by the toilet paper queen. I heard her shrieking the other day when she discovered that someone had hoarded one spare roll of toilet paper upstairs, so the people who work upstairs wouldn't have to walk down multiple flights of stairs when the toilet paper ran out. Edit. It's the cheapest one-ply toilet paper available on the giant rolls that only fit in the special dispensers. I can't imagine anyone wanting to steal it. I know this exact type of toilet paper, and the poster here is completely correct. Not only is it just cheap one-ply toilet paper, but like it sticks and leaves like residue when you go to wipe. It just creates a bigger mess. I wouldn't say you're better off not wiping, but like if you have access to maybe like paper towels or something like that, yeah, you're probably better off than using a giant wad of this cheap tissue. Story 5. A rule that said, if you have time to lean, you have time to clean, which fairly obviously meant if there was no work, then you should be cleaning things. It was at an aircraft servicing station that was fairly small, but we needed a crew of at least 3 people for larger planes. The problem was that sometimes there were just no planes, so there was no work. We would clean for a couple hours and then just run out of stuff to clean. But according to management, that was no good. We had to be busy. It got to be that we would fight over work when it came in because everyone was so bored, and finding pretend busy work was much harder than just working. I remember getting the crew together to pick up pebbles off the taxiway for a couple hours. There's an old joke in aviation, go sweep the taxiway, so we actually did it. Story 6. I used to work for Amazon in Ireland, and their toilet breaks were crazy. Maximum of 10 minutes a day, but also a max of 20 minutes per week. You had to change the status on your computer so everything was recorded, and some managers would call you out on it and even go so far as to threaten your job. I had an understanding with my manager and told him if I needed to take a crap, then I'm going for it. Like any good manager, he just told me that as long as I give him the numbers he wants, then I could do what I want. Edit. This is seriously blown up, so I thought I had to add that I was treated with great respect while working there and thoroughly enjoyed the experience. I can't speak for other employees in the business, but I've heard the stories. Incidentally, I now work in construction where someone isn't looking over your shoulder and checking every minute of every day. If you haven't seen the great movie Office Space, watch it. Describes my situation perfectly. To answer your other question, my manager was looking for performance numbers. I was the one looking for 1s and 2s. Story 7. When I was in the military, I saw a buddy of mine sitting outside crying. I went and consoled him best I could. Apparently, he was just depressed and unhappy. After he was feeling a bit better, I went to go and find someone to tell them what was happening. They knew. In fact, he had been crying so much lately that they had instituted a no crying at your desk policy, which is why he was outside. Story 8. Empty inbox. My boss was an inbox Nazi. Like, if you had old emails in there, he would flip and make you respond to them or delete them. Apparently, you shouldn't have anything left at the end of the day. Deal with them or delete them. Joke's on him, though. I just made a subfolder marked personal and everything went in there. Get effed, Bill, you old wanker. Story 9. I used to work for the now long defunct books, movies, and music store, MediaPlay. Just one of the 285 reasons that poorly run business ran into the ground was the tardy/attendance policy. If you were literally 0.01 seconds late clocking in, even hours before the store opened, it was a really, really big deal. You'd not only be formally written up, but lectured like a child, oftentimes berated even. If you were tardy 3 times, bye-bye. However, if you no-showed and then called 2 hours later saying you were sick, okay, thank you, feel better. This trained everyone to just take a sick day instead of being half a second late to work. Can't tell you how many times you'd see a coworker screeching into the parking lot before work after fighting traffic from a wreck or whatever, noticing it was 8:01, and then slowly driving off to go home and feign being sick. This was particularly upsetting when it was a pull-down stock week and we needed every hand on deck, but had unusually early shifts. Story 10. There is an issue where there was too much socializing going on the factory floor, particularly when people were working while sitting down. False. Skewed supervisor perception. So they made everybody stand. When that presented ergonomics problems, they brought in these weird chairs that made you sit at a slant, had no backs and no wheels, so they wouldn't cause distractions. No part of it made any sense. Story 11. I don't know if it's standard, but I worked at a place where HR wasn't allowed to tell us if someone was fired. It was a big enough place that you might not immediately realize someone had left, and when you found out, you weren't supposed to ask why. So if you wanted to know if they were fired, you asked, was there cake? Which was to say that if the person had retired or left pleasantly after a number of years, they would be given a party with cake. If they were fired, not so much. I haven't seen Brian for some time. Brian no longer works here. Was there cake? Edit. Clarifying that Brian is alive in this scenario, except for below where I said he was dead for karma. Story 12. I used to work at a place in which my boss implemented a no more than 2 glasses a day water policy. What an idiot. I ignored this rule and complained directly to our CEO, and the matter ended later that day. What was weird, though, was the majority of people actually followed the rule, and some even shot me up to HR about breaking the rules. I left not long after that because not only was my boss a bellend, but if my colleagues were going to HR over me drinking water, then I obviously couldn't trust them. First of all, that's illegal. You can't deprive anyone of basic living necessities like water, even in a workplace. And 2, what are your coworkers thinking by ratting you out to HR? Do they think that by quote-unquote following the rules and selling out a coworker that they'll perhaps see some sort of promotion down the road? I don't know. That just sounds super toxic. Glad Poster got out of there. Story 13. Old job of mine in a warehouse. Our stations were pretty far apart, so when we'd listen to music, we'd all usually have our own stuff playing. Not a problem since you could barely hear the neighbor's music. Well, the CEO didn't like hearing multiple songs when walking through the warehouse. He made a rule that we all either had to listen to the same music or none at all. Story 14. Many years ago, I was a vacuum cleaner salesman. There were songs about this particular brand of vacuum cleaner and how awesome it was. Every morning, we had to sing these songs as a group. In fairness, it was a pretty quality item. Edit. It was Kirby. Didn't mean to be subversive, just didn't think anybody would care. Story 15. Once worked at a place where some mini-boss decided that since UPS trucks don't turn left, we shouldn't either. I don't care how well that worked out for UPS, but this was a goddamned ambulance company with a 911 contract. I will turn left if and when I effing need to turn left. Edit. Follow up. I don't know if UPS trucks turn left or not, or if that is beneficial for them or not, and frankly I don't care. The point is that Miniboss thought they did, and that was the reasoning he gave. He was an idiot. I did not stay there long. Story 16. I worked as a call receiver. We never saw a customer. We were only on the phones with them. Rule: your hair must only be a natural color. I dyed my hair the exact same color that someone from a different shift had. I was reprimanded. I told them that if the rule is not enforced for everyone, they couldn't single me out. Their reasoning for letting the other person have that color but not me? Mine was my real hair, dyed an unnatural color. Hers was a weave that could be changed very easily. Really? Then why hasn't she been asked to change her hair? Because that crap is expensive. They gave up trying to convince me that they were in the right. Story 17. My dad told me this one a while back. He used to work for a PR firm. The way he described the office environment, think The Office, but in the 1980s. The company hired a corporate efficiency specialist to come in and improve things. She came in and implemented all kinds of rules, which seemed to follow some sort of caste system. Her philosophy was, The higher your office rank, the more perks you get. Her idea of perks? Number of pictures you're allowed in your cubicle, whether you're allowed to have a potted plant or not. Coffee mugs were only allowed to senior employees. Others had to use paper cups. Being allowed to leave the office for lunch was also considered a perk. Needless to say, a coup soon followed, and she was tossed out on her hiney. Story 18. I work in retail and we have on-call shifts. Your name will be listed on the schedule for a certain time as a call-in, so you have to call 1 hour before your shift to figure out if they need you to work for the day. For example, you will be listed as on call for 2 p.m. and wouldn't know until 1 p.m. if you were working that evening. If you don't call in, it's considered not showing up for a shift, but there's no extra pay for the shift, whether they need you or not. So for 3 days of the week, I don't know if I have to work or not. Can't make any solid plans to do anything except call my work and ask if they need me. I can't imagine having children or elderly that need taken care of because it would be such a hassle to arrange care for them just an hour before having to work. Edit. Okay, folks, I get it. You want me to sue this corporate demon. I'm looking into it now and will update with any relevant developments. I'm going to dig up my contract tomorrow and see if I can speak to a law person. Thanks for motivating me. Story 19. At my old job, HR held a meeting to tell us that there was too much swearing on the sales floor. Someone raised their hand and pointed out that swearing is very common in our industry, and that is the way that our customers speak. HR later sent out a memo explaining that swearing should be limited to conversations with clients. It was amazing. Story 20. It's not like this anymore, but for a while they attempted to have a dress code. Guys had to wear collared shirts, but Hawaiian-style shirts were totally acceptable. You could not wear jean shorts, but jean overall shorts were okay. I got sent home one day because my shorts weren't fingertip length. We were tech support. No one ever saw us. That was the best part. Edit. Because everyone is asking, fingertip length meant standing with your arms at your sides, and your shorts had to be longer than where your fingertips ended. Think grade school rules. Story 21. Not my current job, but I used to work for some crazy people. You had to stand in a specific area while eating so they could see you on the camera. Don't talk to customers longer than 3 minutes unless you're making a big sale. Even then, keep it short. Answer the phone within 2 rings. Keep the conversation to less than 30 seconds. You can't talk to your coworkers outside of work. You can't talk to your coworkers while at work, even if there is not a single customer in the store. I'm sure there's more I just can't think of right now. Okay, that second to last one, you can't talk to your coworkers outside of work. A, how do you enforce that? And B, who do they think they are trying to impose such a rule? When you're off the clock, you're off the frickin' clock. You can talk to whoever you want to, hang out with whoever you want to. That's absolute bogus and grounds for a lawsuit if they try to enforce it. Like if someone was written up for violating that or reprimanded or, heaven forbid, fired, yeah, that business would be going up in smoke. Story 22. This handbook can be changed without notice at the company's discretion. So, medical leave? 3 days medical leave per year. Fine, I'll use my PTO and expect to get disability for the remaining time. After I have major surgery, an addendum 2 weeks later. Medical leave for surgery must have written documentation from a doctor outlining your recovery schedule and when you may return to work. When I return on a limited schedule 6 weeks later, the HR manager comes into my office. You didn't have the authorization letter before surgery, so you better be here or face the unfortunate circumstance of disciplinary action. While I'm at it, since I'm under contract for 5 years, does anybody know about the legal definition of peonage? Edit. The specific text of the disclaimer is, this handbook is subject to change without prior notice and at management's discretion. So that may be the case. They can change the handbook at a moment's notice. However, what they can't do is retroactively punish people for breaking that handbook or code of conduct for things that were not against the code of conduct at the time. Once again, company that cannot get out of its own way with stupid rules. Moving on. Story 23. Had a workplace time our bathroom breaks and deduct them from our allotted 15-minute breaks or lunch. We had to go see the office manager to get a key to open the restroom. As soon as we left his office, he would start a timer. When you got back, he would stop the timer and tell you how much time you needed to deduct from your lunch or next break. They watched our breaks like a hawk. Also, if you made a mistake, they would stand over you and time you while you fixed it and deduct that from your lunch or breaks. You couldn't bring anything, quote, that smells for lunch, and they had no way of heating anything up. I worked out my contract and split. Story 24. Our workplace started a friendly post-it war with the office across the street that went on for about half a day. Honestly, all the pictures were safe. Just Samus, Mario, emojis, super basic stuff. The pieces were getting pretty good too, and it was clear both offices were having a blast thinking of the next fun design. Our CEO walked by around 4 p.m. that day, saw the post-it art, and asked what it was. We exclaimed, "Oh, just a post-it war with that office. Would you like to join us in the next mural?" She said she didn't get it. She didn't get the concept of the post-it war, so we spent a few minutes trying to explain what it was about. You make art out of post-it notes, and whoever has the best mural wins. Pretty simple stuff. She kind of laughed it off, but it was clear to all of us that she still didn't quite understand why someone would do it. What a silly millennial thing, she must have thought. The next morning, an office memo was on every desk saying that no one was allowed to put post-its on windows. We had to take all of our art down. When we asked the office manager WTF we did wrong, she explained that the CEO quite literally still didn't understand it and banned post-its for that reason. Edit. This happened days before Christmas last year. The holiday party was that evening. The next day, Friday, nearly everyone was out to start their vacations. It was very clear that we were not interrupting a busy workday by spending lunch making a few murals. We're not some band of idiots that can't understand the meaning of a productive workday. Our CEO was just a straight-up Grinch. Story 25. Former job. You couldn't eat at your desk. The team managers, however, were pretty tolerant. On a hot day, they would sometimes even hand out popsicles. The regulation people, who were especially in charge on the weekends when no team managers were around, were very strict with this. A colleague of mine was shouted at because she ate a small pretzel, which was her breakfast. Then again, some colleagues would casually eat a whole pizza or kebab while making a huge mess. Story 26. Not current job, but at my last job at a store/cafe, an unspoken rule, as in me and my manager were never told this by our boss, was that we were not allowed to let a health inspector see anything that they come to inspect while still getting a good grade. We followed health and safety laws, but our bosses didn't. We were one of the smaller stores/cafes in this chain of 20-plus stores and cafes. The health inspector must have realized that it was the company's fault for all the health and safety breaches because we, the staff, were given near full marks on the staff's health and safety responsibilities. But the boss's responsibilities was a different story. No fly killer in the store. Despite them being attracted by our bakery part and us having a fly killer out back for over a month, but no one was ever sent to install it, no mouse/rat traps, only one sink, law requires 2, one for hands and one for dishes, no hot water. The counter where we put coffee down wasn't nailed down, so we actually had a customer attempt to sue over a spilled coffee. Some of our bakery was expired, but we were made to put it out because according to our company's food manager, they looked okay, so they must be okay. The list goes on. Our manager ended up showing the health inspector months of emails and texts and WhatsApp messages informing the bosses of these health and safety breaches and asking them to be fixed, all of which were promptly ignored. Later that day, our boss calls and screams over the phone at my manager, tells him that it's all our fault and it's our job to make sure the health inspector never finds out about all that. Over the next week, she comes in every single day where she just watches us work from the office on the security cameras and gives out at us for every little thing and makes a massive deal over everything. Like, for example, I had a mini sneezing fit one of those days and was yelled at in front of customers because I was going to, quote, infect everyone and all our food. Glad to be out of that hellhole. Last I heard, a few of the stores she manages, 4 to 5 store managers quit all in 1 week while she was on holidays, so she took over managing those stores, are failing with massive sales drops and mass employee quitting ever since she took over them. Hope to God she loses her job. Story 27. Previous job. Given a tablet and a locker. Had to look for a desk to sit on every morning. Stupid. Caused unnecessary friction, waste of time, inefficient, and many occupied the same desk every day anyway. They piled junk on their desks so no one else dared to sit. Once, my manager had a mental breakdown. He hid in the other floor away from us. It was ridiculous having to walk that far to get to him multiple times a day. Story 28. Former job at a law office. One of the partners sent an email to the entire staff that employees were not allowed to gossip in the building. What was everyone gossiping about, you ask? Oh, said partner was divorcing his wife and sleeping with one of the associate attorneys in the firm. But, don't gossip. Story 29. I wrote the ridiculous coffee-making rules for my workplace, but I had my reasons. I was a woman on the edge. The coffee was unbearable, and every time it was bad, I would have a parade of people through my office complaining and a deluge of emails wasting my time. So I wrote a guide, rules if you will, on how to use the extremely simple drip coffee maker in our break room. I emailed them to everyone. I put 2 copies in the break room. one of them in the cupboard where the ground coffee was kept. I went through it with people who didn't understand. Minutes of everyone's time was wasted. No improvement. Endless complaints to me, more of my time wasted. By this point, I was fed up of even hearing the word coffee. The sound of the coffee maker caused me to flinch, so I ordered pre-packaged coffee grounds to take the measurement difficulty out of the equation. How can you get that wrong? I thought naively. On the first day of what I was sure to be the new world, a coffee nirvana, I went to the coffee machine with high expectations. The senior partner had beaten me to it. She had put 4 sachets of coffee into the machine and added enough water to make 6 cups of coffee. The first mouthful nearly killed us. I went over it again with her and returned to my office, confident that this was a one-time problem. After lunch, I went back to try and get a cup of coffee. My expectations were not so high. I witnessed another senior partner carefully opening the sachet of grounds and reach for a teaspoon. She carefully spooned out a quarter of the sachet into the machine, filled the machine with enough water for 12 cups, and triumphantly threw the rest of the sachet away. I waited. We tasted it together. She was appalled. She had no idea why it was so weak. I started a new pot, slowly filling with despair as it brewed. I couldn't shake one thought. I work for a doctor's surgery. These people prescribe. I went back to my office. I ordered a giant container of respectable instant coffee and a padlock. I kept the ground coffee locked on my desk. I brew 4 pots a day. This takes less time than the complaints. And on my day off, they make do with instant. We have a kettle. People are welcome to bring their own filter coffee and do with it what they will. Until someone can be trusted to make a pot of coffee, which is not so awful as to inspire 8 people to email me multiple times a day, each one of them hitting reply all to create a small email firestorm in my inbox. This is the way things have to be. Story 30. I work for the federal government, so there are tons and tons of rules. Most of them are there for good reasons. The one I really hate, though, is that we have to pay to join the water cooler club to use the water cooler. It's like $30 every month or two. Like, I get it. Taxpayers shouldn't be on the hook for extravagant purchases, and there are certain perks you get in the private sector that you don't get in the public sector, and vice versa. I just don't think it's the height of decadence to want decent water. They say we can just use the fountains, but the fountains are disgusting. This isn't the local post office either. This is a major department's main building in DC. Story 31. Dress code policy is just dumb at my work. Different positions have different requirements, even though we all work in the same office. My favorite rule, though, is the one on shorts. We can wear shorts on Fridays between Memorial Day and Labor Day. However, the shorts can't have pockets on the side. It was written to discourage ratty cargo shorts. But the way in which it was written allows me to wear gym shorts, so I do. Yeah, I totally agree that cargo shorts should never be worn by anyone ever. And if you do wear cargo shorts and you're listening, I'm judging you. I'm just kidding, you can wear whatever you want. But that is funny that this person used it as a loophole to wear gym shorts on Fridays. Yeah, I like that. Story 32. At my last workplace, we had to pay 50 cents to use a K-cup. It was an office. They also had a no websites or YouTube policy and policed us using these security cameras. We get messages if they noticed us on a site. It was a well-known fact that the manager watched Netflix in his office and played World of Warcraft while watching the security cameras to make sure people weren't slacking. Is it that hard for your IT department to put up firewalls or block websites that you don't want them to visit? Why do you have to watch them on camera? That's kind of weird. Story 33. We have to do all of our paperwork at least 3 times. There's a copy of it in our personal folders, a copy online, and a copy in our store folders. Not only does it waste time and paper, but forgetting to do one has gotten people fired. They did the other 2 identical pieces of paperwork confirming that yes, they did take out the trash and yes, they did check the store voicemail. But how dare they forget to do the 3rd piece of identical paperwork? Our weekly visits from corporate revolve around whether or not we've all done this paperwork. It's so redundant. Story 34. Not the most ridiculous, especially by virtue of what everyone else will say, but at my first job, we had a clean desk policy. In other words, nothing on your desk besides what you're currently using. Pretty effing stupid by default, but me and a few others specifically, working in IT, often had to set up computers and laptops, while also taking on support tickets at the same time. And we had no spare desks to use as a lab, so we couldn't set anything up anymore. We had to leave the office to do that part of our job. So we no longer could take calls, tickets, etc., and we just kind of effed around in the tech area, because otherwise we'd have to climb stairs up and down every time we were going to work on some new machines, even servers. I told all of this to the superiors. they held fast. The price was an untold amount of tickets building up, new users not getting their machines in time, and a general decrease in productivity, ultimately leading to the company failing. Story 35. We got a new vacation policy where you could take unlimited time off. When he announced it, we looked at the big boss like he had a dick growing out of his forehead. All the while, he assured us that if we wanted vacation, to take it. Really? A little bit afterward, he changed it to discretionary time off, meaning that if your boss approved it, it was okay. Then it changed to 160 hours should be the max, and if you go over 200 hours, then you probably don't need to work here. Story 36. No scotch tape on anything. I was a teacher, and the principal wouldn't allow it in the building, threatening letters in your file for insubordination if she saw it on your desk. Only painter's tape, which by design is meant to not stick very well. I hung posters in my room with circles of duct tape on the back side, with strips of painter's tape along the front side just for show. Subtle, petty insubordination. Story 37. There's a few. I'm not allowed to whistle. Also been told to stop yawning, although not sure if the boss was serious about that one. We weren't allowed to hand out black pens to customers for a while. Had to give them blue pens, despite the fact that most of the stuff the pens were needed for required black ink. We aren't allowed to give customers change if they ask. Not allowed to agree with customers if they moan about prices. Not all bad though. We're allowed snacks while working, and we're not expected to look busy when we aren't, so we can just chat if there's nothing to be done. Story 38. For a while, we were going through a lot of Band-Aids, and my manager was tired of buying them, so she locked the last remaining Band-Aid in the safe. We had to have one, required by the health inspector, and no one was allowed to use them if they cut themselves. I worked at a fast food joint where people could nick themselves on knives, tomato slicers, sharp edges, etc. If you cut yourself, you just dealt with it, / openly bled. The rule changed pretty fast though when she cut herself while using a box cutter and we had no bandages in the store. Story 39. If we're short of employees, we can't say we're short-staffed or make an excuse as to why a line is backing up. Can't use a knife, but won't supply you with box cutters, and you can't buy your own box cutter as it's not regulation. Manager then complains the boxes are ripped open. If we're over quota on any food production, each additional unit must have assigned manager authorization, even if customer is standing there asking you to cook it. As you can imagine, this policy didn't last long. Story 40. Supermarket. 4 to 5 people in your department? Can't have more than one person on a 15-minute break at a time. If it gets busy for a few minutes, call in a team member from another department or another manager to help out. But you never call the manager, who goes nuts when 2 of you are on break at the same time. She will also turn a blind eye to multiple friendly to her team members being on break when she is. Story 41. Former job. There was trouble when I officially moved desks and my new desk had a phone with call display. Apparently call display phones were allowed for people at a certain pay level. Your pay level also governed the height of your cubicle walls. My manager's solution was to promote me. Another former job. We were mandated to work on an engineering-related research project outside of work hours because a responsible engineer always gives back to the engineering community. I could live with that. However, your project had to be related to the company's business. Story 42. Oh boy, I can't decide just one. Working at a bar inside a premium 5-star hotel. If a customer asks for a straw, we have to say we don't have them. If he doesn't insist, he doesn't get a straw. But if he insists, we have to gladly offer him a brand new biodegradable straw with the company logo and brag about how nature-friendly we are. We separate plastic from organic waste, which is nice, except all the waste ends up in the same place at the end. No recycling at all, but you'll be in trouble if you're found mixing it up at the workplace. For some dumb reason, we're only allowed 1 masher at the bar. We have 3 counters. I'm in charge of one of them. I make more than 50 mojitos a day, and so do my workmates at the other counters, with just 1 masher. If you can't reach something that's on a shelf, which are incredibly high by the way, without stretching, you must use a ladder. Plot twist, there's no ladder. It results in me, the only tall person at the bar, being bothered all the time to reach things they can't. We can't bring any food at all from work. My shift ends at 1 a.m. There's no customers at all at that time, and there's no way they can see us leave because we leave from a basement. Every night, the kitchen brings lots of food for us to have dinner. Seafood, sushi, top quality Iberico sausages, you name it. What we don't eat goes straight to the trash. And it's a lot. A lot of food. There's more, but I was supposed to pick only one. So, story 43. I work as a native English teacher in a Chinese kindergarten, and at the beginning of each year, we redecorate our classroom. Naturally, to do so, we must use craft materials. However, only one person in the school is allowed access to the store cupboard, and even then, only Chinese teachers are allowed. The reason for this rule? Foreign teachers have been hoarding material in their classroom. So now we have a storeroom full of unused material and bare ugly classrooms. Welcome to Chinese Logic 101. Story 44. Being late is tardy, normal, but also leaving early is tardy, WTF. So our boss told us to schedule appointments during the middle of the day. So where I would leave a half hour early to go to a late afternoon dentist appointment, or a half hour late to go before work, I now clock in, leave for the appointment during the middle of the day, and then come back, which takes at least an hour and a half. Maybe it's their way of giving me an unwritten perk. Story 45. Current work. Not allowed to make jokes, political observations, or anything not strictly work-related chat with customers. At all. Zero tolerance policy. This started when a busybody staff member complained because we mentioned Brexit a few times and it triggered her sensitive aversion to conflict. Not allowed to leave 5 minutes early despite no customers being on the premises and everything being tidy and everything ready for the next day. No clocking in machine, just this stupid rule that encourages people to grass on each other. Can't park in the car park on weekdays between 4 to 5 p.m. because the spaces might be needed for overflow staff. If you log onto your computer and don't register with the audit service, you get locked out and reported as unwilling to work whilst you're being recorded. 3 strikes and it's a formal warning. Old jobs. If the booking system screwed up and cost the company money, if you made the booking, it comes out of your commission, despite it not being your fault. Not allowed to bring in homemade food for lunch. Lunch was provided free of charge, but the choice was limited. If you gave a discount or get the booking over the line, the difference came out of your commission. If you worked overtime, you get paid for it, but you have to submit an overtime payment request form for every hour you work, as it's considered a session by the computer system for an hour's work. And the overtime is billed on how many extra sessions you do, so sometimes you can fill out 8 overtime forms, which can get lost or rejected, etc. Story 46. My boss, which I put in quotes because technically I'm an IC, but he still tells the ICs what to do, has sent out multiple memos reminding us to wear our shirts that the company sent out to us. Well, not only was I never sent a shirt, but when I first signed with the company, my contract explicitly stated that we weren't allowed to wear any uniforms or show any indication that we're affiliated with the company. Story 47. We work with salespeople from other companies, and so we have a very strict conflict of interest policy. We can't accept any gifts or go out to lunch/dinner with vendors. It makes sense for the company to have this policy, but people's loose definition of gift is insane. I was questioned about a pin with a Marriott hotel logo on it. Another coworker got in trouble for having a little stress ball with a company's logo on it that he got at a trade show. Story 48. In my line of work, we aren't allowed to have sexual relationships with our patients. It's so irritating because what if the love of my life came through that door? Am I to just let her walk back out there and never know what life could have been like? What about if I already have a sexual relationship before she becomes my patient? Seriously, never become a vet. So for this one, I was thinking to myself, then you just leave the job, and then I got the joke. That was a good one. Yeah, we don't want to encourage bestiality around here. Story 49. Documenting your productivity. Worked for one of the top 10 companies in the US. You might know them. They make crappy computers and really crappy printers. My job was reporting. I was very good with spreadsheets and somewhat enjoyed it. Because of this, every time something needed doing like that, it came my way. Eventually, I had a mountain of work that was pretty impossible to finish on time. I started writing scripts, macros, and more auto hotkey language than I even thought possible. More and more, my work was automated, and all I had to do was hit the on button. I could even leave my station and my work would finish itself. It got to the point where I'd remote in from home to start my work and just not come in for the day. My managers didn't care because I was doing the work of 5 people in ways they couldn't comprehend and getting them better numbers because of it. Then the productivity Nazi came to power. I hate this female dog. She implemented a policy where everybody had to report how they filled their day down to the minute in one of 14 categories. You were then given a productivity score, and anything under 80% was an automatic meeting with her, your direct supervisor, and their supervisor. I was safe for a while because my boss covered for me. However, the type of person that takes this sort of role is usually the type of person everybody hates, who will go on personal missions for the pettiest things. See the toilet paper queen in another comment in this thread. You know who I'm talking about. Anyways, my score was always abysmal if I reported it properly. I had to start lying and pretending to be busy as more and more this lady would watch me and quiz me on what I was doing. My supervisor would give me busy work that was way beneath my pay grade to shut her up. Like, guy before me was getting about $30K a month for the company out of his billing, and I was pulling in $80K a month for them because I automated the very tedious things, so it became easier to go after the minuscule stuff more and more. But here I was pushing mountains of paper into a shredder machine so I'd stay busy and keep the female dog off my back. Story 50. I currently have 30 days of paid sick time. I've had that many over a decade since it doesn't roll over. It just accrues slowly until you have a month. In order to use sick time, you need a doctor's note. That all sounds reasonable, right? Here's the catch. You must take 2 unpaid days off before you can use any sick days. These are not paid retroactively. You just lose 2 full days of pay. Ostensibly, this is to stop people using sick days as personal days, because a doctor's note is not sufficient. Every time I bring this up with one of the bosses, on the rare occasions they don't stare at me blankly because, do today 2 days get paid retroactively out of my sick time is apparently rocket science. They have confirmed that I am indeed effed in this manner. But the silver lining is, I can't afford the deductible on the health insurance that costs me more than rent every month, much less the 20% of the remaining balance. So in the end, it doesn't matter how messed up my sick days are. Just wanted to shout out that subtle Linkin Park reference in the last sentence there. If you know, you know. If you don't, look it up. Story 51. Nobody was allowed to drink at their desks in case they spill their drink and break the $5 keyboards we typed on. I offered to sign a binding agreement stating I would pay double the cost of anything I damaged by drink spillage. They said no. I offered to go to the store and buy 10 keyboards for them to put into storage as replacement. They said no. I don't work there anymore. 100% sure the reason that rule existed was so they could be sure they had a workforce of mindlessly agreeable doormats. Story 52. In my teens, I worked a small factory job for a while. This was about 20 years ago. One of those guys came out as gay. This was a perfect storm, because most of the guys working there were homophobic rubes. He got harassed, something awful, but this harassment was stopped dead in one fell swoop. So said factory had one bathroom on the factory floor with 2 stalls. So naturally, all these rubes decided to make their homophobic thoughts known on the walls of the stalls. Some really gnarly stuff, telling him to kill himself, etc. So the plant manager caught wind of this. This guy's my effing hero. He went in and took the doors off both stalls. Both of them. For a whole week. Now, remember, these guys were about a step down from lumberjack in terms of roughness. Most of them were also chronic alcoholics. Most of them would have liquid crap all the damn time from the previous night's drinking fest. For a week, anytime they needed to poo, they had to walk for 5 to 10 minutes to the front office and politely ask the sweet and nice-looking lady at the front for permission to use the office bathroom. And make no mistake, this office was quiet. You could hear a pin drop. The plenum above the bathroom didn't separate the office from the bathroom either. So picture this, a rough bearded country bumpkin with an ass full of last night's remnants of hot wings, bourbon, and sexual frustration knocking at the gates of hell come to the front office to ask the nice looking girl for the key to the bathroom. He then goes into the bathroom and spits a hemorrhoid by trying to shape his rancid starfish into convoluted shapes to keep his crap sturgeons quiet so that she doesn't hear him furiously unleashing his Taco Bell meat blasts into the mouth of the innocent porcelain statue, best described as the sound of air bubbling into a water cooler. At the same time, he tries to be quick, because he knows if he's in there for more than a couple minutes, she's going to know he's dropping a nasty deuce. Suffice it to say, when the doors were put back on a week later, after the stalls were professionally cleaned, the guy who came out was never bothered again. Story 53. Worked for a pretty crappy small ambulance company service once. Each week, they posted new memos about things we weren't allowed to do, including sitting on folding chairs in the back parking lot. Most EMS agencies let you chill when not on a call. People obviously thought the rules were silly, and one week there was a memo about not taking pictures of the memos, which were being mocked on social media. Story 54. Not letting us dial 911 from our suite. We learned this the hard way. A coworker was having breathing problems, and we tried to call the emergency number from our desks. We found out we couldn't. Our suite actually had to have someone walk all the way out to the lobby for someone to get them to call for us. Okay, not even being funny here, but is this not like a massive liability breach? Someone can't breathe, someone's bleeding out, there's a serious health crisis afoot, and seconds could be the difference between life and death. So why is this rule a thing? That's really, really dumb. Story 55. Our CEO is a bit of a weirdo, so we have all kinds of stupid rules that have been popping up. Like we can only use the brown recycled paper napkins from the dispensers in the cafeteria. Additionally, despite living in a very casual state, he cannot give up his Washington, D.C. learnings and will lose his damn mind if he sees a man without a tie. Several colleagues keep ties at their desks for this reason. The crown jewel for me is this. He made us all sign a contract of sorts that we wouldn't swear, use inappropriate acronyms, or inappropriate hand gestures. Now, I totally get that we have the internet now, and asking, is there someone wrong or is that a FLK, funny looking kid, is likely to upset some people. So would holding your middle fingers in the air around patient admissions. However, sometimes there are no words that work as well as, I'm really sorry, this is absolute bullcrap that you inherited this horrific disease. Or, these new CMS rules are effing ridiculous. I keep a swear jar on my desk and pop $1 into it whenever I just have to use a swear. Story 56. I cannot carry anything in my pockets while on the sales floor. Understandable, because they don't want my phone or wallet visible and easily stolen. But it also applies to anything like trash I find on the sales floor, or the hundreds of little sticker backings left after I print new prices for clearance items. I'm not allowed to carry a waste bucket for the backings, and I cannot put them in my pockets. But they must be disposed of in a secure disposal basket in the office that is typically locked except for when I start and my end of shift. My bras have suddenly become much bigger. Story 57. Government office. At one point, our manager ran around adjusting everyone's hole punchers because someone had complained that the papers we were spiking weren't all aligning in the folder, i.e., they needed to set a regulation hole punching setting for us to use so everything would line up. Later, we were told to staple a specific sheet to the inside of the folder. We were told very specifically how many staples and where. At a previous private sector job, we had a terrible manager who introduced all sorts of weird micromanaging rules under her tenure. But the best example I can think of is that if a phone call came in, or if we just needed to find someone in a hurry, we weren't allowed to do an all call or page the person, as it would be distracting for museum visitors and appear unprofessional. She said if someone was out in the building somewhere, i.e. not at their office extension, we should just call around different extensions located throughout the building until we find them. Because, a random wall phone ringing while a visitor walks by is less distracting and more professional than, John, call the front desk over a PA system. Story 58. I work in an office that supports an outdoors/hunting store. Labor Day isn't a holiday. If one takes a day off on either side of Thanksgiving, Christmas, it disqualifies them from holiday pay. So yes, I'm expected to travel back into town the day after Thanksgiving to sit here and do nothing on a Friday. Story 59. Work in IT support. Everyone was pulled into a meeting, one by one, to discuss negativity in the workplace. We were told we are not allowed to complain about clients between ourselves, not for the reason that I would expect and would understand, in case a client heard it on the phone, but because of the negative energy in the room. In IT support, complaining about people is the only thing that gets us through the day. Edit. Previously to this, I worked in a retail store of a decent size, which only ever hired 2 staff. The managers would sit out the back and do nothing pretty much. Would always catch them on their phones when I went back for something. They had a policy also where you were not allowed to be doing nothing, and you were also not allowed to sit for your whole shift. Sometimes had 11-hour shifts, except for the 30-minute break where the manager went on the floor and I got to have a coffee. I was expected to run around cleaning if no one was in the store, and not be allowed to be behind the till, even if I had already cleaned every single shelf in the building. This also had the side effect of being at the back of the shop, behind aisles, without a bell on the door when someone came in, meaning people would often come looking for me and be really angry because I wasn't already at the till waiting for them to give them their cigarettes. This also reminded me, I worked morning shifts usually, and was required to be there 15 minutes early to put the papers out and start putting magazines out, before it hit open time, because we would have people lining up and knocking on the door at 6 a.m. for their papers. This time was unpaid, as was the time I had to stay every day counting my till after waiting for the person taking over my shift to come out. To explain the above, person starting midday walks into the shop at 12, which is their shift, and my shift ends. They then count their till, then bring it out, then I go and count my till, then get to leave. Which means I ended up working between 15 and 30 minutes overtime every day, more or less. Maybe more, without extra pay. The only time we had extra pay was if we worked a full hour of overtime. Story 60. Grocery store here. We are not allowed to make an announcement that we are closing, or now closed, or to confront a customer about being closed. Apparently, the CEO was in one of our stores past our closing time when a manager in the store made an announcement to the customers that were still shopping many minutes past closing. CEO didn't like it because customers matter way more than employees going home. So now it's banned, and we have to stay in the store and deal with still shopping customers even 30 to 40 minutes past closing. Some people know we're about to close and do it anyway. So now what we do is make an announcement to night shift employees to make their final purchases. It doesn't really work. Story 61. I worked at a US Navy base, and we were told we were not permitted to jog on base with headphones in because we wouldn't be able to hear the cars coming up behind us at the dangerous speed of 25 miles per hour and thus be killed. Probably the best one was absolutely no memory devices are to be inserted into our workstations. No memory cards, flash drives, floppy disks, etc. Why? Because a Chinese virus got into a server in Afghan via a flash drive. The real female dog was that I had to take pics of various job sites on base and needed to upload. Solution? Separate workstation, where I uploaded the pics and burnt them to a CD. There was also the contractor services for our IT systems that we switched to, an office full of 20 plus engineers, and the IT people determined we only needed 4 licenses. They deployed all the workstations very quickly. They got paid an absurd amount for each station, while I was without auto CAD for a year. My new station was for nothing more than checking email. Story 62. I work for a small company, less than 10 employees, that distributes textiles. The company name is the founder and CEO's name. Nothing in the office is allowed to have a brand label. Any food brought into the building must be repackaged in a bag or foil, and every morning I have to pour my lunch, soda, or coffee into an unmarked mug before walking in. All boxes are turned inside out and taped back together. She hired someone to file the brand logos off of the computers and appliances. Cleaning supplies have labels carefully peeled off or rebottled in generic containers. The exception to the rule are fire extinguishers that are rotated so that the labels are not visible. Story 63. I wasn't allowed to, adjust myself. When I complained to the branch manager that the girls were adjusting themselves, all willy-nilly, and it made me uncomfortable, I just wasn't being sensitive enough to the female experience, according to her. Yes, I was fighting a pitched battle from the get-go. So glad I left customer service to go into a STEM field. Story 64. Only orange high-V jackets and white helmets allowed. The company I work for only sent me there for 1 day's work. I only had a yellow high-V and a black helmet. The site manager told me I wouldn't be allowed on site. I said that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. It's PPE, not a effing uniform. To which he replied, "My site, my rules." I told him to go F himself and had the day off. My boss just laughed when I told him. He didn't know that was the rule either. Still got paid for the day off though. Story 65. I worked in a gasket factory that gets extremely hot, even during the winter. For years, workers asked for fans, but never got them. Instead, most workers brought their own fans, and that worked fine for a decade. Then a new plant manager took over, and he banned fans because, quote, if a gasket fails on the power cord, you could be electrocuted. Never mind the hundreds of other power cords laying around our workspaces. Fans were the only thing that could kill you, apparently. Story 66. From a previous job. First was cell phones had to be turned off and stored in a locker by the boss's office, only to be retrieved during lunch and when leaving. The second was no one could bring anything in for the office unless approved by the boss. I would stop maybe once a week and buy donuts for everyone because I thought it was nice. We had to sit down and have a meeting about it because, quote, you can't just decide it's donut day. That's only for special occasions. This workplace sounds a lot like second grade. Put your phone in a cubby and we're going to have to sit down and talk about bringing donuts into work because you can't just make those decisions. Yeah, this supervisor sucks. It needs to be teaching kindergarten. Story 67. My last job wouldn't let anyone leave the building. Not on your 15-minute paid breaks. Okay, understandable because you're being paid. And not on your 1-hour unpaid break. Once I climbed the corporate ladder a little higher, I found out the many cameras we had throughout the building. 4 to 5 in common workspaces and a minimum of 1 in every meeting room/office. And 2 to 3 in our very small break room. Recorded not only video, but sound. The ownership team, a Christian family made up of a brother and a sister and their father, would review the tapes and use recorded audio for reasoning of termination. Example, an employee was terminated because they had her on video during her lunch break talking to a coworker about how she was worried the company wasn't doing well financially due to many layoffs and downsizing from a brand new shipping facility to 1/4 of the size. Our HR manager stated that she was, quote, inciting fear in other employees with the sole reason of creating chaos within the company. Now with my state, as most others, is an at-will state, so legally they could have fired her because she looked at someone funny. However, it didn't sit right with me ethically, so I left soon after. Story 68. I'm a delivery driver for a grocery chain in the UK. The higher-ups recently implemented a rule where we weren't allowed to deliver to any customers earlier than their booked hourly time slot and told us they would rather us be late. Why? I just don't understand this rule. Literally 99% of customers like getting their order early. We call beforehand to ask if it's okay. And if they aren't in, we simply wait until the booked slot. This worked. This made sense. It meant if we were ever held up or really busy, we wouldn't be late to anyone as we'd be ahead of ourselves. These higher-ups haven't ever stepped foot in a van, but boy do they love making up new rules. Story 69. I can't think of anything specific offhand, but these ridiculous rules are always implemented for one of two reasons. 1. New management trying some stupid crap they learned at corporate Six Sigma circle jerk. It never works because the managers are trying to change and perfect a business they don't yet fully understand in practice, only in theory. 2. Someone did something really effing stupid and now we all have to pay for it. Story 70. At my job, it's apparently a rule you're not supposed to leave to pick up your child if you're a single parent, and the school calls reporting the child is sick needing immediate pickup. Also, apparently perfectly acceptable to tell a single male he shouldn't be allowed to be a single parent because it interferes with work and is immoral. Yeah, I had to literally tell management that I will name drop them directly to law enforcement if they keep me from my child, as it is super illegal to tell someone to abandon their child. I presume, at least. Not fired yet, but the gears are turning and I'm pretty sure I'm on the chopping block as a result. Amongst others, this is my biggest issue. Look, good for this poster for actually putting some 2 and 2 logic pieces together and questioning the validity of these so-called rules. I think a lot of organizations make rules and regulations that A, aren't ethical and B, are just flat out illegal. And so many people just kind of mindlessly go along with that. But, you have to, if it doesn't make sense, you should at least raise concern or suspicion to HR. And if they back up the employer, then you leave. Story 71. No talking. I'm doing order pulling in a warehouse. Mistakes when pulling are a huge issue. The company sells itself on the orders being right. So they don't let us talk to one another out on the floor when pulling as not to distract one another and lose focus. The effed up thing is, they kind of have a point. They used to let us talk and it definitely effed productivity. Now, that isn't to say we literally can't speak. We just can't be carrying on conversations and effing around. Still, the silence is weird at first. Story 72. My former place of work had rules such as no mobile phones allowed, even to send a quick text, no browsing of non-work related websites. If you wanted to check non-work related websites, there were 3 laptops in the staff room that you were allowed to use on your lunch break. You weren't allowed to leave your desk for more than 10 minutes unless it was work related. You weren't allowed to go and talk to other staff at their desks about anything non-work related. Women could mostly wear whatever they wanted to work. Men had to wear smart shoes, trousers and shirt, and optional tie. Every Friday was Dress Down Friday, except for no visible piercings or tattoos. This was some awful ambulance chasing, no win, no fee solicitors where I used to live. It was run by this multimillionaire tosser who basically treated all the staff like disobedient children that needed to be kept in line. A few of the senior management were completely up his arse, so they'd inform on people who were trying to discreetly check a text message or something. Anyone leaving at 5 p.m., the time they were paid until, would get frowned or looked down upon at like some kind of slacker. It was effing horrible. I'm an adult and a human being. Effing will treat me like one. Thankfully, I got the hell out of there after 2 months. Edit. Apparently, you all work in really awful environments and consider that normal. And I'm also apparently a millennial kid, despite my age. Good times. Story 73. Not a company I worked for, but a company I worked at. The company I worked at had a rule. All contractors must wear coat and tie. No exceptions. Running cable in a crawl space that day? Coat and tie. Coming in on Saturday for a phone system upgrade? Coat and tie. Outage at 2:30 a.m. on a Tuesday? System needs a physical hard reboot? Contractors must wear coat and tie. Story 74. Once worked at online shop and it was so crazy. Was there just 2 weeks. When put dots at orders lists to mark them as packed, make it smaller, because you use too much ink from a marker. Guy who worked there for 2 years was not allowed to enter the storage area without permission from the owner's wife. Owner's wife had a desk behind us to see all screens. You cannot move your chair, which had wheels, because you can break it, on a damn flat concrete floor. You cannot adjust the chair for yourself, because you can break it. Maybe in the future, you will be allowed if you're good. Need to bring shoes for change, even in the midsummer. You cannot directly call the owner. Next room just behind the door. You need to ask his wife to call him. You cannot even ask him by his name, not even Mr. Smith, only boss. Company had just the owner, the wife, and 1 employee. I and a second new guy. That's all. If you were 10 minutes before 9, you're not allowed to enter. You need to wait at the gate. Owner with his wife was inside but wouldn't let you in. Just look at you through the window and that's all. I had to bus and was always 15 minutes late. I had to wait. Gave me 2 days to learn about 30 companies I sell. Not only names, but what they make, few products by names, and origin country. After I failed for just a few of them, I missed the products, they threatened to fire me. The next day I didn't show up. Not for a minimum wage without registration. Yeah, this is just modern day slavery. And I'm glad that you got the hell out of there. Good for you. That's terrible. Story 75. We had quite a couple crazy ones before our old C-level guy left. 1. No birthday cake / cards. He was convinced people were looking up personal information in the company's ERP-DB, and the dude was sensitive about his age. And 2. No lunch meetings or group lunch outings without inviting the whole department. A second person complained about being left out of a lunch outing, despite the fact they weren't a member of the sub-team that went out together. Story 76. Throw away because I'm paranoid. Where to begin? Worked for a company that was so tight on time, people were fired for taking breaks longer than by a few seconds. All time was documented by the millisecond. Example, hour, minute, second, millisecond, and was a part of your quarterly review, which impacted your pay. You were allowed 2 15-minute breaks while on the clock. Any time used outside of this was considered personal time, and personal time was also documented to the millisecond and was accounted for during your review. Lunches were 30 or 45 minutes long, depending on your pay grade, and were off the clock. You could not clock in early, and since this time was also documented by the millisecond, you could not clock in late, as it was considered being tardy. Clocking in to start your day had a 5-minute time allowance that would allow you to clock in early for 5 minutes to prepare for work. Any time before this was considered to be personal time and thus considered to be stealing from the company. All of this was controlled by a single person, as her only job was to watch who was and who was not on or off the clock. She created the schedules for hundreds of employees. All requested time off went through her and required a 2-month advance request. If a family emergency came up, you had an annual 2-week bank that it pulled from that also included your vacation time. Every time a pregnant woman was hired, they were forced to quit or were fired. Every time. Always due to time. Every single time. I spent 3 years there, only because the benefits were crazy cheap, since that's what the company did. I was let go for having an equivalent of 1 full day of personal time accumulated over the 3 years I worked there. I asked for proof, and they brought me a 3-ring binder of every single clock punch I ever made, measured to the millisecond. In-out break. 1. Lunch break. 2. Personal for 3 whole years. I was absolutely floored by the ridiculousness. I was escorted out and advised I could come by the next day for my things. They were itemized and placed in a box at the security counter. That's just that one issue. I've run into former coworkers who had similar stories and other horrors, like supervisors who were food Nazis. Food was not allowed at your desk. No open containers for liquids or solids, so the occasional candy jar that might pop up was confiscated. Some of them would wait at the door if you were lucky enough to have outside lunch and make sure no cups were brought in. Micromanagement was awful too. Each supervisor had an assistant and each team consisted of 10 to 12 people. Each supervisor had a coordinator and each coordinator had 5 to 7 supervisors, and there are about 5 coordinators who each reported to 3 assistant managers who reported to the general manager. I'm gonna stop there.